Hello and welcome to Media Lit, where we treat each piece of media like great literature. I'm your host, Randy Elaine, and joining me as always is my beloved co-host, Kris Ingersoll, who I have not seen in a while. We've been a little bit busy. Kris, how you doing tonight, man?
So good, Randy. I'm glad you asked because it's better being with you always. And I don't want to get like too mushy at the top because I'm sure we'll get into some feels as this one goes on. But I love Media Lit because we like bring folks together. Like if there's nothing that else that I get from this, it's like great time in community chatting with folks who are wonderful. And tonight we get one of those like mixed episodes with a brand new guest that we get to welcome
Mhm.
into the Podling family and a returning family member, an OG podling, and bringing all these folks together just revs my engine, so stoked to be here tonight, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing really well because we're here to talk about Lost, and we have a really special guest on this episode of Lost and Lit. We've got special guest Karen Mauro. And as far as I'm concerned, she is part of the Lost royal family. Because if you've been following us for a little while, back in December, Kris and I got to meet with one Joe Garfine to do a little hype pod for the Getting Lost fan documentary, which is now available all across the internet streaming. You can buy that. The folks who kickstarted the video even have some really cool Dharma branded like actual physical media for this incredible project that involved all sorts of cast members. So head back to December if you want the full breakdown of Getting Lost. But yeah, Karen appears as one of the fans and offers, I think, some of the most important insights that help us see how big this community is and how much it means to everyone. So she honored us with her presence here tonight. Karen, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, and I really am so honored to be with you guys tonight. This is so cool. I'm so excited. That's all I can tell you. I'm so excited.
I don't want to turn this into like a second full uh getting lost episode, but I was curious if you might be interested in telling us a little bit about how you got involved with that and what it meant to you.
Um, I did get a email from Taylor, uh, probably going back like 2 Januaries
Hmm.
ago or so. Um, and I had already been involved in the lost community for over about 18 years, maybe a little bit more. So, I mean, I know Ralph, who's also involved in the movie, and pretty much Joe, anybody who's involved in the lost community, we all know each other, and most people who know me knew of my story. They know me as a podcaster and a blogger for Lost,
Hmm.
um, but also some people were aware of my story, and my story was that I am a cancer survivor, but that my coincidentally, the diagnosis and when Lost started actually happened at the same time, and my entire cancer thing ran right alongside of the 6-year run of Lost. So within that time, uh, Lost for me became just this, uh, it was a lighthouse for me. I mean, how else can I say it? That it was a horrible time in my life, scary. Uh, it was very bad, but Lost was this gift in front of me that not only gave me strength to fight for my life, but also to it changed my life. It gave me perspective on life, on living, on my past, on my future, about anything. It was a totally enlightening experience for me. So when all is said and done from that journey, I had this wonderful relationship with Lost. So some people in the community already knew that story because I had wrote about it. And I get an email from Taylor, and he said he was making a documentary and that, Ralph and Alex, Alex is the person who filmed older footage. I was filmed for that too. That was like 10 years ago.
Hmm.
And that they they felt that my story would be a really nice piece to show how much that a story, a show can bridge the gap of just fandom in life and how strong a story can be, that it can affect people's lives. So we got together and we did an interview and we talked about a lot of things. And we talked about how I got started in blogging and how I got started with the podcast and the lost community and the friends made, and
Mhm.
my cancer. And there's sometimes I find it as much as I'm rattling right now, I find it sometimes so heart-wrenching for me, even all these years later, to properly articulate the connection I have with lost and the how grateful I am because I'm still connected to all of that. It's part of my heart and soul. I tell people it's in my blood now. It's part of me. So the like, loss just changing a life is eh, a lot of people have been touched in many ways by this show. And it has helped people and it has changed their lives and it has. I can only tell you my perspective and my journey, how it literally was this whole entire show and cast and crew and writers were literally holding my hand, and I use that example in the movie because I needed otherwise I wasn't conscious while I was sick. I was so, so sick that there were times I
Mhm.
couldn't remember being awake. I couldn't when I finally fell asleep, I couldn't dream. I mean, it was a very I'm talking literal black time in
Yeah.
my consciousness, in my existence. And the only time I could stay awake was when Lost was on. And I would try so hard to stay awake, and my husband was really cool, and he'd
Mhm.
record all the episodes for me so I can go back and watch them. And then as I was going through all of that, I realized this story is speaking to me.
Mm,
Okay, so if you
mm,
tell that to somebody, they're like, "Okay, you're nuts, girl. You're crazy. Like, what do you mean a story is
Mhm.
speaking to you?" No, I can only tell you again from my experience and where
mm,
I was in my life, the story of everything that was happening is in a literary sense, in a spiritual sense, in a common sense, in a
Mhm.
science, faith, and all of those things was literally all those parts I was going through. So it spoke to me,
mm,
and I feel like that by the time I was got my clean bill of health when Lost was ending, which was
Mhm.
ridiculously coincidental,
mm.
um, that I literally took the journey with the castaways, and it did change my life, and I'm a different person because of it.
I think that connection and the gratitude is what comes through so clearly in the documentary. It was a wonderful inclusion. I'm so glad you're with us tonight.
Oh, thank
Yeah,
you
thank
so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that because even just in our little theater in Marblehead, Massachusetts, where we went to check out one of the premieres across the nation, there was a Q&A with Joe Garfine afterwards. But I mean, your segment of the doc sparked a few questions, and like people were kind of chiming in and sharing some of their own stories of some of their own health things they were going through, or people around them. I believe I've mentioned on this podcast before you know, during the run of Lost was when my father got his ALS diagnosis, and that was something we were going through and watching Lost together, so to see the powerful imagery of, like, fathers and sons bonding,
Yes.
connecting, it's always gonna stick with me, and everyone's got a story or an
Mhm.
experience like that. On a more joyful note, though, I mean, obviously, like, bringing us all together is a joyful thing, uh, but a couple months ago when we were, planning this podcast, I saw you on social media posting some, like, very cool ritzy photos with a few stars of the Lost fandom. Can you tell me a little bit about, what that was all about and who you got to hang with?
I sure will. That was in January, and, there was a very, very s I live in Florida, South Florida, and I spend a
Mhm,
lot of time in Orlando. I'm just 2 hours away, so we're in Orlando
mhm,
quite a bit. And, there was a very, very small, and when I say small, I mean teeny tiny convention, um, in a I don't even know what kind of facility it was so bizarre. It was a weirdest set of circumstances, but it was a small convention when all
mhm.
is said and done, and a few of us losties got together and it's like, "We have to go." Why do we have to go? Because Josh Holloway's going. So, a few of us got together there, and, so, Henry and Cusick was there, Josh Holloway was there, and Malcolm was there. So, we got 3 of
Mhm,
the losties, and, it was a great time. They were very accessible. I had the pleasure of meet I haven't met Josh, that was the first time that I got to meet Josh.
yeah,
And although I had been at many official Lost events and Malcolm was there, we never connected. We'd be, like, across the room and, it was like,
Mhm.
"Hi, hi," and then, but we'd never had a chance to talk. Um, Ian, I've talked to a couple of times. I've been able to go to a few events. Um, the, uh the writers and producers of the show have been extremely generous, uh, with me, and I've been invited as their guest to a few things. So I got to, be at a few I got to go to the VIP party when the finale was
Mhm.
happening and stuff like that. So I've been extremely lucky and blessed. But these people are normal, really fun, great
Mhm.
people, and they take the time to look you in the eye and have a conversation with you, and I want every lostie to do that. I want every lostie to experience that.
Now, Karen, I'm sure that you are completely correct, but I don't know if we can call Josh Holloway a normal human being with that magnetic
Oh,
personality, you know?
oh, he he he's exactly how you see him,
Yeah,
that what you imagine him to be, he is. Take Sawyer out of that and bring him, and
yeah,
he is that. He's a very he still has his,
yeah,
very Southern, gentleman way about him, and he's funny, and he thinks everything else is funny, and he was adorable.
yeah. Yeah, back when we dropped our pod with Joe, I released a little clip on Instagram, just a little mini audio clip, and I just threw in, like, a GIF of Sawyer from Lost, and, yeah, we have, like, our normal, like, social media interaction. Months and months later, almost every single day, we get, like, multiple likes on this post
Yeah.
that just mentions, how magnetic Josh Holloway is. Like,
S
it looks like it's never gonna die. He's a special man. And, of course, I think Joe's got a thing or 2 to do with that as well, if we wanna talk about great energy.
Certainly, certainly. Sawyer
Exactly,
brings in the likes, for sure. That one won't die.
exactly. No, exactly, and it's, I I again, being at a couple of events, um that they were all at. Sometimes I'm able to connect with a lot of the cast at the this was in the past, other than January. And I had been able to get a lot of pictures with a lot of the cast at these parties and events and things. And then sometimes you're in the same room with people, but you never get close enough.
Yeah.
I was at the season 6 premiere in Hawaii, and I got to watch the movie where the cast was watching it. I got to sit with them in that area. So we're all in this area together, and I'm looking around and I'm like, "Oh my god, there's John Locke. Oh my god, there's Sawyer. Oh my god, it's like because now you're, like, right in their visual, and on their territory, so to speak. But it was great. So you do get to see them, and if any losties I know have gone to conventions before to see a few of them, but this is I think I've met Elizabeth Mitchell at a convention before. I think Ian was at a convention before, but this Josh, we had never seen him at a convention, even make an appearance anywhere, so this was,
Yeah.
like, the first time this happened. So I was not passing up that. I'm like, "Look, this man is 2 hours away from me." I told my husband, "I'm going, and I'll see you. You wanna come with me? You can come with me. If you don't, you don't." But I'm going to see Josh Holloway.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, and you certainly belong in that room with those people sharing that energy. Kris, I've been so excited to introduce Karen all day that we've got another guest sitting here in the Zoom lobby that has not received a proper introduction yet.
Yeah, I have the sincere pleasure. I guess, any of the podlings at home were familiar with the Lost and Lit brand. They know who's coming next, but I'm so pleased to introduce the one and only Dr. John Aspler, our resident Lost doctor. Welcome back to the pod, Dr. John.
Welcome. Yay.
John is not only our resident Lost expert, he's also a new dad. John, welcome back. Tell me,
Thank you.
how are you, brother? And, I guess, how is Lost now that you're a father? Has it changed your fandom?
Yeah. Well, first of all, always delighted to be here. Lovely to meet you, Karen. This is very exciting to be able to chat together. And I'm doing well. I am both really happy and very tired all at once. We've got a 1 month newborn at this stage, and she's just, yeah, absolutely fantastic, life changing, obviously. And in terms of Lost and children, I mean, Lost is kind of roadmap about how to not be a bad dad. So I'm certainly taking lots of lessons about what not to do and how not to interfere in my child's life and or time travel shenanigans of being bad parenting, doing bad parenting. So that's some of what I've taken away from it. But really the only Lost I've watched since having a child is the season 4 finale. And there are a few things in there about bad dads or bad parenting and child napping and murdering for your dead child. Lots of things have happened in Lost in this particular set of episodes, kidnapping children on helicopters, all of those kinds of things. So, but really, I think for me the big thing is that I think it's a really wonderful thing to love a show like Lost because it's a show that really calls you to revisit it as often as possible and being able to engage with and receive your favorite media at different
Mhm.
stages in your life. As we talked about in the episode on White Rabbit, Lost is something that when I watched it as a teenager informed my career choices, my interests, my politics, and all of those things all at once. And then rewatching it during the pandemic, it really helped me finish my PhD and build community with new coworkers and friends. And so I'm very excited to go on a journey to watch it as a parent. I've heard that Michael, in particular, for example, as a character, is someone who becomes significantly more sympathetic to parents, to fathers.
Mm.
But beyond that, of course, just thinking about all the bad dads on the show and how to not be those people.
Wise. Very, very wise. There are some fantastic anti-examples, throughout Lost. I'm sure watching
The bad dads.
the helicopter crash with Aaron felt a little different this time around.
Oh my God, how was Aaron okay? That's wild,
Yeah.
absolutely wild.
It's wild. We'll get there, but absolutely wild.
Magical Island.
Magical. That's true. Good point. I forgot about Magical Island. Good point.
It's not an island, it's a place where miracles happen, guys.
Yeah. All right.
Um,
That's fair.
before we hop into the episode proper, a new season 2 tradition we're trying to establish here is instead of making our guests wait until the end of the episode, just to let people know where they can be found if they want to be found, or if you have any work that you'd like our listeners out there to check out. We just want to give you a chance to share that. Karen, is there any place you'd love for folks to find you on social media or any work you'd love for them to check out there in the world?
I am on the socials. I am in the socials. I am under the socials. I am everywhere on the socials. You can pretty much find me at any of them at I am Karen Mauro, or Karen Mauro. Like if you find me on Facebook, I'm just Karen Mauro. But everywhere else, I am Karen Mauro. Instagram, I am Shortcake815.
Mhm.
And because yep, that the moniker had to follow me to some of the socials, so it stuck with me on Instagram. And anything I have going on, you could find out right through those the socials. But find me, we'll have fun. I on Facebook I share stupid memes and to lighten my load of the day. But there's always lost things to share, I love sharing, love and light, lost, and some crazy memes every once in a while.
Yeah,
But come
a
find
very
me.
Perfect.
a very fun follow. Every once in a while, I show my 10-year-old your post because you post like a roller coaster or something, and like that's his favorite. So, John, where would you like folks to find you out there in the world or your work?
Yeah, so you can find me pretty much on all social media at Lost Cadence. Blue Sky and Instagram are probably the two that I use the most, and where I actually, engage with this podcast and talking about media. I also have a blog on Substack called Serially Engaged. I have not posted a single piece of writing since 2022. It's all just been episodes of this podcast I featured on. So with a
Yeah.
1 month old, maybe now's the time to get back into it. The season 3 premiere of Wheel of Time is coming out tonight at 3 a.m., and I might be up feeding that newborn at that time. So maybe I'll get back into Wheel of Time coverage, which I last did in 2021. But otherwise, yeah, you can find me there, serially engaged.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right, folks, we're going to get into this episode. So, just the blanket spoiler warning. If you are here listening to a podcast that jumps around to random episodes of a show that ran for 6 seasons over many years, you're probably not worried about spoilers, but we're going to talk about anything. We could just casually randomly spoil something from the finale at any given moment, so please be prepared. Um, but before we do any of that spoiling, we're going to spend a couple more minutes getting to know Karen with our more formal introduction to her relationship with Lost. If you want to know a little bit more about myself, Chris, and John and our relationships to Lost, go back to our episodes on White Rabbit and Catch 22. Catch 22 has a special feature where you get to hear a cameo from Terry O'Quinn himself, congratulating John on his PhD, which is a really fun little treat. Um, but yeah, let's get into it. Let's move on to the next segment.
I probably call every segment my favorite segment, but I really do love personal connections, so I'm glad to get to jump in. Karen, we heard a little bit about, like, the earliest parts of your Lost journey and some of the things that came from it, but, like, how did Lost first hit your radar? How did it become a part of your life?
Well, you have to realize that 20 years ago, we had things like newspapers and TV guides,
Mm,
and we had promos on regular network TV. And My husband came home one day, and he reads the paper incessantly, and he's like, "Hey, there's this new show coming on. We saw the promo for it. It looks really great. We got to check it out." And of course, we're gonna check it out because it looks awesome. So, we did, we check it out, and we watched it on this, uh, this is the only way for me to say it, fellas. We used to have these big ass box TVs.
Oh,
They
yeah.
were huge.
Yeah.
They were humongous, and that's how I watched the pilot episode on this TV, and it was fabulous, and I from the minute Jack opened his eye, I was in. That's it. I was
mhm,
in. It was beautiful. It was like a motion picture. I was
Mm,
sucked into the mystery immediately. That's it. So I really am involved with Lost since the pilot episode, that
mm,
very famous crash day. So we were hooked right from the beginning. That same year, though, we had twin hurricanes in Florida, so we had been like
mm.
3 weeks without power and everything. And another great thing was back in the olden days, they used to repeat episodes.
mhm.
So we have to watch repeats or um,
Mhm.
they re-air or whatever. So I was always caught up and we recorded every single one of them. So I've been on this airplane since day one.
Love that. It's such a relic. I'm so glad you mentioned the TV guide. Such a relic of how TV was not just made, but marketed then, right? That you would have this kind of lead up to pilot season, expecting the new fall drops and what was going to be coming out. Maybe some of your favorite actors appearing, but um, yeah, I love the excitement that must have been building around a moment like that we just don't get as much anymore. That's cool.
Yeah.
No, because it's I feel like a lot of the magical part of what TV viewing was, that's gone because we just have streaming. So we all get on our social media and we all say, "Hey, you got to watch White Lotus. Hey, you got to watch this thing. You got to watch that thing." Um, and that's great because it's word of mouth that pushes what gets shown really,
Mhm.
in a big circle. But back in the day, it literally was about marketing and articles, truthful articles, not just because, a network or a movie studio wanted to push something specifically because, Tom Cruise was in another movie or something. Okay, it genuinely was a thing, and, we don't have that anymore at all. That even just the glory of reading a TV guide and an
Hmm.
article that was written about something, we don't have that anymore.
Yeah. No, I'm
It's not
I'm
the
fully
same
with
scrolling it's not the same scrolling on your phone reading, a BuzzFeed
no.
article or something like that. It's not the
It's
same
not the
thing. I
same.
wanna hold a piece of paper and, anyway, I know I'm old, but
I'm with you.
No,
I'm
no
with
way,
you.
Karen, rest assured, I moved several boxy televisions in and out of apartments in my youth before the flat screens took over, so I know the pain that comes with that. I also had a full year where my little sister bought me a subscription to TV Guide under the name Miss Chenandler Bong, which is a Friends reference, uh, for those who are uninitiated. Now, Karen, you spoke a bit about, loss being something that you shared with your husband. I know Chris and I both shared loss with our wives before we were married. So is there anything more to that relationship or any other individual relationships in your life that you really associate with lost?
well, My husband and I watched it, and I wanna say for the first 3 seasons, probably our oldest son watched with us, but then, he's out doing his own thing and,
Mhm.
but since then, the oldest son has watched it a few times. The Lost is on a loop in my house. It's never not on. So there's always something for you to walk in on as far as an episode goes. The younger son, nah, not so much, although he's pretty much aware of what the story is. But the interesting thing about my husband Chris and I watching is we would I we we had 2 totally different perspectives of the show. I had one perspective of what I thought was going on and what I was extrapolating from it, and he had something completely different.
Mm.
And I swear every single week I'd be like, "My God, we're just not watching the same show. What the heck is going on here? I don't understand. How are you not do you not see that?" So they would be that. And I would tell him, "That's the only time I feel like you're not, like, paying attention to me." So, but really, we to this day, 2 different we watched 2 different Losts.
Isn't that incredible? I I suspect that probably isn't totally uncommon amongst, like, groups of watching friends or partners because you said earlier the shows, like, spoke to you, and I get that, and I think that's what's so beautiful about stories, that it can speak kinda right into our hearts, and that can feel different and say sound different to somebody sitting on the couch right next to you.
And I
That's
feel
really
like
cool.
everybody who watched Lost extrapolated something different from it.
Mhm.
And there is no right or wrong. It's just what spoke to you. What did you pull from it?
Mm,
What did you need on your path of your adventure at that time of your life that needed to resonate with you? Because I guarantee you, if you watched Lost 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and you watch it now, you're going to get a whole different version of that show because your life is in a different chapter. So I really feel like it is one of those shows where we're going to need to watch that again because
Mhm.
our own life adventure is a continuing thing. So I find it such a beautiful, beautiful piece of art that it's fluid and it's constantly moving and I can always grab something out of it. But there is no right or wrong. And I really do
Mm.
feel like it's just my husband and I watched 2 different shows.
mhm,
Yeah, I love that. That's sort of exactly what I'm hoping to take from Lost as I rewatch it post newborn birth because yeah, these things this art isn't static. It's something that we get to receive over and over and over again in
Mhm.
radically different ways depending on who we are and how we're feeling and I'm very excited about that.
I always reach towards the metaphor of it,
Mm.
the metaphor of this journey to enlightenment, and I would gravitate towards that aspect of it all the time. And I think he watched it more literal. So,
Mhm.
there's a smoke monster. Well, that's not what the smoke monster is, that kind of thing. So we would just it
Yep,
was just
yep.
this constant, we were John and Jack.
excellent, John
David
and Jack,
David
that
Lynch and Mark Frost on Twin Peaks even. I love
well
it.
done.
Yeah.
Great duos.
So it's been a long journey. We've been with this show now 20 years. Uh, how has Lost influenced your individual interests or your style or your values?
Um, well, I'm a completely changed person. If
Mm.
I'm to be completely honest and blunt, I feel like in my life I've always been a good person. I'm
Mhm.
I'm not a bad person. I don't do bad things or anything like that. Um, but taking the journey and understanding and learning, because Lost was a teacher to me that whole time too.
Mm.
Um, it taught me how to um, stop punishing myself for things that were not my fault. I need to learn to
Mm.
let go of things. I cannot grow unless I let go of something else. So all of these things, again, I- I'm the one that gravitated towards that metaphor and that uh, the, the the philosophy and that kind of thing. To me, I saw it as completely a journey to enlightenment because I
Mm.
felt like there was many times I was John Locke. There's this man who knows I'm here to do something, and I'm trying, and I'm gonna make mistakes, but if I keep moving forward, I could take
Mhm,
3 steps forward and go 2 steps back,
mm.
but let me keep going, you know? So I felt that there was a lot of lessons, so I was taught a lot of things. So that completely changed who I am as well.
I so dig that. I
Mhm.
really relate. Yeah, I was over here giving you snaps and claps as you were speaking because I really dig that.
You know, when I was talking about these kinds of things back in the day on our podcast, um,
Mhm.
there there were I could completely see how a lot of people didn't vibe on that where I was vibing,
Yes.
and I got that. That's okay. So I never took offense to it, which was another thing I
Mhm.
learned from Lost, is I don't have to be offended by things, okay?
Yeah.
It's just you do you, I'll do me, and we just flow, man, just flow, you know? So, I would get a lot of hate mail from speaking my that perspective that I had, more of that
Mhm.
spiritual, metaphoric type thing, not religious. Absolutely, that's not what it was for me. It was
Mhm.
philosophy and spirituality leading to a way that I can go through a life, death, and rebirth of my own. And that's exactly what happened. So when I would talk about those things, a lot of people would like, oh my God, she's crazy. She's nuts. Where is she getting this from? Didn't you just? So it's like, we're all cool. Just you take the journey you need to take, and I'm gonna take the one I need to take, and that's
Mhm.
it. We just flow.
Now on this podcast, we like to have a good time, and we're here to celebrate things. We're not here to nitpick or bring the negativity. But when you talk about something like great literature, I think it's important to lovingly acknowledge its areas for growth. So Karen, Lost is clearly your favorite, or at least amongst your favorite piece of media out there. It's number 1.
It's
For
number
for
one.
folks at home who can't see us, Karen vigorously shook a finger to indicate that it was clearly a number 1. There's no one else in the conversation. Um, and you love this thing as well, you should. But does Lost have any flaws?
Nothing is perfect. I mean,
Mhm.
there are and then now, I don't wanna be put on the spot because I wish I'd have made a list specifically. But, yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, there are things that I'm like, or, that kind of thing. But as a whole, I still have to look at the thing as a whole. I could look through
Yep.
people feel the same way that I feel about Lost, when a song moves you. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that song is
Yep.
just, I have goosebumps and it's perfect and it's this. Or I read a great book and that book spoke to me. So the piece of art we're talking about with Lost, um, for me is it's organic. So it,
Mhm.
it's nothing is perfect, but as a whole, the damn thing is spectacular.
Hell yes. Absolutely. No, thank you so much. That was an incredibly eloquent answer to the question. I think you circled it back to what you said earlier about how it's okay for things to have flaws, and it's okay for things to have different interpretations. So beautiful work.
We're all flawed. We're not perfect. People, we're just, again, we're not here to uh, in life is if we're here to just pick on the flaws all the time, we'll never get anywhere. But if the experience as a whole, when we're talking about Lost, for me, and for many other people, still feel it's a perfect piece of art. Um, so on a whole, when we're standing back and we're looking at this grand, beautiful thing, that's for me, that's what it is. Perfect. I could go back if you want, if I needed to, and say, "Oh, this is the thing that," no, it's not necessary because the whole of the beauty of it is there.
Perfect. Now we're about to get into a very special string of episodes of Lost. But before we do, Chris and I have had a chance to talk about our experience with getting lost. Karen got to talk about her very personal experience with Lost. But John, like in the lead up to this documentary and in the days and weeks that followed, there's no one I talked to about this more than you. Can you just tell us a little bit about like your viewing experience of the documentary?
Yeah, absolutely. Delighted to. So I'm not sure what the context was in the States, but in Canada, just we have a couple major movie theater chains. That's it. They kind of rule everything. And because of that, in this case, it was a very positive thing because all across Canada in every major city, there were two showings of the documentary. oh, I wish I remember when exactly it was, but everyone got to see it at the same time. And so I went with my Lost watching crew, the crew that I watched Lost with during the pandemic. We all worked together. We were all colleagues, and I think I've told this story already, but I'll just cover it very briefly again, which is that my colleagues and I started this job 3 months before the pandemic hit, and sure, I met a few of them in person, but I didn't really get the opportunity to connect with them in the way that I would really want to. And so I was trying to find ways to stay connected online. And I was simultaneously working this full-time job and struggling to finish my PhD. And through online Lost communities and podcasts, I suddenly realized I really want to engage with this media again and think thoughts the way that Lost encourages me to think thoughts, and those thoughts are the kinds of things that helped motivate me to get back into and finish my thesis. And so, all that to say that during this time, I was like, okay, you know what? I don't know these people very well. I really want to get to know them. Let's start a book club for a TV show. And we watched Lost all together. We watched it between 2020 and 2021, and we did it all weekly. So we got to have that weekly experience of engaging with Lost without the 9-month wait between seasons or anything like that. And so when the documentary, when we found out that there were showings across the country, we said, fantastic, let's all just go together. And so for me, my favorite part about the documentary was bringing my Lost community to watch the 20th anniversary documentary about the Lost community. It was just a really wonderful experience. There was a guy there who I did not know who had brought a whole bunch of Lost props with him. So I got photos with like holding well, after the documentary, my wife purchased for me a little mini VW bus you can see up there
Oh,
in the
yeah.
corner. But I was so excited to hold it after the documentary. This thing this guy brought, and he was also one of the people who'd purchased one of the many cut up parts of Oceanic 815 itself. So he brought us out to his car so he could show it to us. It was a
Yeah,
very
yeah.
cool community experience with my Lost community, which I absolutely adored.
Losties.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful group. It's a beautiful group of people. I mean, I I've made friends that I have for the past over 18 years that I've made, like, actual friendships with. And, I've watched people get married, get divorced, have children, become grandparents, graduate. I mean, there's just been a whole lifetime of experience with the people that I've met through this amazing show. And now I have 3 more friends.
Right.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, like trying to run this podcast, so much of like social media interaction can at times feel kind of transactional. But like the people I've connected with online from the Lost community, like those tend to be much richer connections. Like there's a genuine desire to make a real connection, and it's just really special.
Yeah, I'm glad that you guys you got to experience the movie Getting Lost in a theater.
Mm,
When we had the premiere in California, of course, there wasn't an empty seat. It was filled with just people passionate about Lost, and to have that first night and to feel this energy from everybody in that theater, what that brought me to tears alone because you can hear the laughter and the cries, and they got excited when they saw somebody they knew on stage, on the screen, and it's just so powerful.
perfect. All right, folks, we got to get into the episode as literature at this point. And because this is Lost and Lit, and because we have a unique format where we don't care about chronological order, we follow our emotions and our feelings and the moments in the series that our guests care about the most. I just want to place you in the correct episodes. So we are reviewing the season 4 finale. There's no place like home. This consists of, 2 or 3 episodes, depending on how you want to talk about it. But season 4, which you're going to find is episode 12 on Netflix, originally aired on May 15th, 2008. And then episodes 13 and 14 aired as like a 2-hour special finale event on May 29th, 2008. This was just coming out of the writer's strike of 2008. And because they could not add an extra episode of Lost, they kind of just snuck in like an extra long final episode so they could kind of sneak in some extra content without fully breaking their contracts and agreements and whatnot. Uh, and they did manage to get a lot in here. So I'm gonna do my best with my signature synopsis. I really tried to show some restraint with a three-parter to cover. In the season 4 finale, we open on the arrival of the Oceanic Six to their first public appearance after their rescue. After getting their story straight for the press, they get a quick reunion with their families back home. Over the course of the finale, we learn that everyone has been going through changes. Sun is still mourning the loss of Jin, but she makes a very badass move to take over controlling shares in her dad's business. Hurley makes his way back to the institution in an attempt to escape his cursed wealth and process his visions of the dead. Saeed is still kicking ass, but not seeming very happy in his international assassin mode. Jack and Kate's attempt to play house with baby Aaron has failed. They are no longer on speaking terms. Kate is racked with guilt and dream visions of Claire. P.S. Claire is Jack's half sister. Who knew? We see Jack back in his desperate state from the season 3 finale, but we'll come back to that later. Over in the OG Island timeline, our Losties spend most of the episode cocking and pointing guns at each other and shuffling themselves around the island in a confusing game of tag. When they aren't pointing guns at each other, they're facing off with the other's elite guerrilla fighters and or Kimi's mercenary team. Obviously, despite all of this chaos, Benjamin Linus continues to evade capture at every turn. Like he says in the episode, he always has a plan. He even clears the mercenaries out of the Orchid Station so that Jack and Locke can go another round in their man of science, man of faith struggle. Once again, they fail to see eye to eye. It's stressful enough that all of this chaos keeps our faves from reaching the freighter to escape the island, but it gets really messy when they discover the 500 pounds of C4 explosives inside the freighter. It turns out their lifeline is actually a death trap. Speaking of lifelines, that C4 is rigged to a remote detonator that goes boom if Kimi dies. It's the old dead man's switch. It turns out that our Losties are very lucky that Charles Widmore sprung for top of the line body armor for his stooges because Kimi survives multiple bullets to the back. Later, Kimi manages to drag himself down to the depths of the Orchid Station to confront Benjamin Linus. Kimi realizes a bit too late that Benjamin Linus has an even darker soul than a very tall and sadistic mercenary. Ben avenges the death of his daughter Alex and dooms everyone on the freighter to die. This shocks John Locke, but Ben shrugs it off with a simple, so? But he does tell John that he's the new leader of the others before piecing out to move the island. Meanwhile, Michael, Desmond, and Jin attempt to disarm the C4, but the best they can do is freeze the battery and delay the trigger. When the explosives arm, everyone from the top of the lost call sheet books it to the helicopter. Jin doesn't make it to the chopper before the freighter explodes. Just as the chopper crew starts a depressing flight back to the island, it blinks out of existence. Why? Well, because Ben Linus turned a giant frozen donkey wheel under a greenhouse. Duh. Our helicopter crew runs out of fuel and gets stranded in a life raft before Penny shows up to rescue them. For real. The episode comes full circle when we finally understand how the Oceanic Six found their way to the press conference from the top of the episode. Finally, depressed future Jack breaks into the funeral parlor to greet the mysterious Jeremy Bentham. He is accosted by Benjamin Linus, who insists that Jack is going to have to get a shave and convince his old buddies to return to the island. Everyone, even him, the man in the coffin, John Locke. So there you have it, all three parts. Folks, what do you want to add, highlight, or reframe?
No, I wasn't sure how you were gonna pull this one off. I really wasn't, and you did it, bud. You really did. 3 episodes, which watch
Ooh,
together like their own little movie. Like, you need some context to enjoy the movie properly, but really they act as quite the piece of storytelling on their own, and I think you capture that pretty well.
I wasn't sure how I was going to do it either, to be totally honest with you. speaking of context, we've got the tools we need to dive into this episode. Uh, and we are gonna, instead of turning to myself or to Kris, we're gonna turn to the one, the only John Aspler, who is gonna set the stage and ask us our most important question about this episode. John, take it
Right.
away, man.
Now that you have turned the proverbial donkey wheel and left the island, so I am in charge, I am going to talk a little bit about The Wizard of Oz, or more to the point, get all of us to talk about The Wizard of Oz, the most important literary reference of this episode. It is called There's No Place Like Home. This is, of course, an explicit reference to the movie The Wizard of Oz, a little bit less of an explicit reference to the book, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, on which it is based. And this is not, although this is, of course, an explicit reference for these 3 episodes, The Wizard of Oz is a very common thematic connection to Lost. We've talked a bit about Alice in Wonderland on previous episodes. That's another one. We've talked a bit about Narnia, but The Wizard of Oz is a huge sort of piece of connective tissue across fantasy literature for what Lost is trying to tell us. So I would love to hear from each of you, maybe starting with Kris. Can you tell me one moment from the episode, or one set of scenes, or one theme that evokes the themes of The Wizard of Oz?
Oh, this is I'm sorry you came to me first because in prepping for this, this struck me for the first time ever because I was like, "Let me see, if I can find, like, a fun way into this." I figured out who the wizard is, and
Mm.
it's the freighter. Because Randy, you said it perfectly in your synopsis. Their lifeline was a death trap. That thing that they were counting on, that they were all reaching for, right? In this case, our adventurers don't have different purposes for needing the wizard, aka the freighter. They have one purpose, and it's to get off the island. And then it's not at all what it's pretending to be. It is the opposite of that. It is
Mm.
doom. And perhaps the wizard isn't exactly doom incarnate, but he was not prepared to deliver our adventuring friends the way that they expected that he would.
Amazing. That is not a connection I would have made ever, and it is fantastic and works super well for me. Maybe Karen, can you tell us a little bit about the connection between The Wizard of Oz and this set of episodes?
Well, there's a few, moments, but I'll stick to when we see them on the airplane when they're,
Mm.
going to Hawaii. Jack is sleeping to show us
Mm.
he's in a state of sleep, so his consciousness is altered, just like Dorothy's knocked out,
Hmm.
different consciousnesses, um, which is important. But the goal of that is to go home. No matter what, it's to go home. And with all the death references in the episode,
Mm.
we have to always remember, in my perspective, I can't say we should always remember because it may not be the same for you. The island experience is life, death, and rebirth.
Mm.
Okay. So everything we see that has to do with being born, conceiving, being born, conceiving, dying, death, killing is all to lead you to a rebirth. So think about the literal senses of those things. But when we're talking strictly about the idea of Wizard of Oz, I'm totally hooked into the whole idea that we're exposed to Jack sleeping right off the bat when they're on that plane.
Love that.
And
Mm.
that, when we see Dorothy, she gets hit on the head, she's sleeping. So now we're gonna get led into a different dreamlike reality at some point, right? So but yeah, but the goal is to go home.
Mm.
Amazing. 100%. Yes. Randy, over to you. Tell me a bit about The Wizard of Oz and your experience of these episodes.
So, I sat down to rewatch this three-parter because it's been a minute since I rewatched this episode. My last full rewatch, started in 2019 and went into, I think, 2021 or so. Um, and I was getting ready to make all like the classic Wizard of Oz references. That we were expecting and accustomed to. But I could not get the current pop culture moment out of my brain, and I could not get Wicked out of my brain. A play which had opened on Broadway when Lost started for sure. And while I don't think this was the intent of the creative team, I could not stop thinking about like the central question of Wicked, which is how does someone become wicked? How do they become a monster? And we get all these different versions of monsters in this episode. You know, the most obvious of which is Benjamin Linus, who can doom a freighter full of people to death and shrug it off with a so. Yet he's way beyond the point of forgiveness, yet we can still somehow see that sense that there's something more complicated under there. Like, we know there's a story to this man. We know there's more we need to understand about him and how he came to be this way, how he came to feel this way. What are these human connections like Alex that seem to have, to a certain extent, cut through like this wickedness within him? And to a lesser extent, you know, someone who we still had a lot to learn about at this point, like Richard Alpert, you know, who is still a pretty sinister presence at this point in the show. And we want to know what he's all about, where he's coming from. And as someone who really enjoyed the recent theatrical version of Wicked, I couldn't help but sit back and imagine, like the early days of the others as like everyone back in their college days, and they were a little bit different and they were better intentioned. And now we're seeing them pushed into the future, in this absolutely destroyed state. So that's the angle I decided to come at it from. But John, I'm just like ready to like sit back in my chair because I want to know where you're going to take this one.
Well, first, I just want to say that Wicked has been on my mind quite a bit lately. When you're sitting there trying to find yet another song to sing to your newborn to comfort them, I just find myself going through the Wicked soundtrack and singing "Defying Gravity" at her. So, yeah, very, very much on my mind as well. Uh, and as for this episode and the Wizard of Oz, um, I one of the things that I think I've mentioned in a previous episode is that I wound up watching the last couple seasons of Lost with my father, which was a very meaningful experience
Mhm.
for me, and looking forward to at a developmentally appropriate stage watching this with my daughter as well. But one of the first pieces of media I ever consumed was actually the whole L. Frank Baum Wizard of Oz series. My father read them to me as bedtime stories between the ages of 4 and 6. And so I don't have a great memory of them because I was 4 to 6 years old, but I certainly have a lot of affection for the series. And as I was thinking about this episode, I wanted to dig into not just sort of the wonderful Wizard of Oz itself, but think about some of the themes tied to the whole series. And not to immediately contradict you, Chris, but of course, I want to point to our the more conventional interpretation of Benjamin Linus as our wonderful, terrible Wizard of Oz. He is the man behind the curtain in his very first flashback
Mhm.
episode.
Not Henry Gale.
Not Henry Gale, yes, our literal balloon man. Benjamin Linus is, of
Mhm.
course, set up as the wizard, and um, of course, this is relevant to the way that he is a con man and a charlatan and a leader, someone who has usurped a kingdom, perhaps
Mhm.
from its rightful ruler, or at least from another ruler before him. Benjamin Linus is our stand-in for the wizard, and I will come back to a couple themes and a few of our other discussion points. But one of the things that really struck me about this episode is and as I mentioned earlier, is the child napping of it all. There are so many things happening with, Kate leaving with Aaron. Walt shows up for the first time in ages after, of course, himself having been child napped by the others under the direction of Benjamin Linus. And as it turns out, there's a really, really relevant connection to the second book of the Wizard of Oz series called The Marvelous Land of Oz. And so here's a
Mhm.
quote from Glinda the Good Witch talking about looking for the rightful ruler of Oz, the daughter of the former king who has disappeared. And Glinda says, "Her name is Ozma, but where she is, I have tried in vain to discover. For the Wizard of Oz, when he stole the throne from Ozma's father, hid the girl in some secret
Mm.
place, and by means of a magical trick, with which this is Glinda again, am not familiar, he also managed to prevent her being discovered, even by so experienced a sorceress as myself." And Benjamin Linus has kidnapped children, literally, both, the orders to kidnap Walt, his own daughter, Alex, who has now died. He has kidnapped her. And so the Wizard of Oz, who has usurped the throne of Oz, aka the island, has this child that he has also kidnapped, who certainly it falls apart a little bit. I don't know who the rightful ruler of Oz is that he's hidden away, but he has kidnapped many children, as the Wizard of Oz himself
Mm,
also has. And ultimately, it's a different sorceress, Mombi, who is the person that has hidden away Ozma. And she says that the wizard brought to me the girl Ozma, who was then no more than a baby, and begged me to conceal the child. And he taught me all the magical tricks he knew. Some were good, and some were only frauds. And this question of what Benjamin Linus actually knows, what is the true magic of the island that he
mhm,
can control versus the way that he is simply ruling over everyone through fear and manipulation. And this last quote I'll read, and then I'll end here, is sort of toward the end of the book. They say the wonderful wizard was never so wonderful as Queen Ozma, the people said to one another in whispers, for he claimed to do many things he could not, whereas our new
mm,
queen does many things no one would ever expect her to accomplish. And I like to think that maybe that's our Hurley here. Our Queen Ozma is our rightful ruler of the
mm.
island is Hurley. Of course, he's not a kidnapped child. The connections fall apart a bit, but I do think that Hurley can accomplish many things we did not expect of him, where the wizard claimed to do many things Ben did that he maybe could not do.
A delightful final point.
Bravo.
Yeah, there's no one I
Yeah,
love more than Hugo, so, Dr. John, a pleasure as always to be in your class. Thank
yeah.
you.
Oof, yeah, what a point, John. Like, one of the things that, like, really hit me on this viewing was, like, right at the top, everyone steps off to greet their families, but, of course, Kate and Saeed are feeling lonely, and there's no one really there for them. But there's this moment where Hurley just pulls Saeed over to introduce him to his parents and just suck him right into the family as if he were at a viewing of the Getting Lost documentary, and it's a beautiful thing.
Well, he's like the heart of the island, you know?
Mhm,
He you know, again, everybody he has issues, he had flaws, he had problems. It doesn't matter. He still has heart.
Mhm.
And, he's a good egg.
He's the
mhm.
one. He is the
He's a
one.
good egg, yeah.
Well, Dr. John, thank you for bringing us so, helping us to zero in so sharply on, like, this main literary pop culture reference, but anybody catch anything else throughout the three-part episodes that you wanna share? Randy, we can jump to you first if you got another pop culture reference you caught.
Yeah, we call this Lost and Lit because we always take some time to talk about how an episode of Lost is in conversation with literature and pop culture from the past and literature and pop culture from the future, right? Like, we can go back to the original Wizard of Oz books, but the show can still be in conversation with things that are happening now, like this resurgence of Wicked that I mentioned earlier. So the pop culture reference that I was the most excited about, it comes from Sawyer. He and Jack are, broing out, having one of their moments of bonding. They're trying to figure out how to approach the Orchid Station. And he says, "So, what's the plan, Sundance? Uh, any Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid fans out there?" Uh, just before, they go out in their blaze of glory. We end on the still frame. I suppose we could argue that they successfully defeated an entire army, but obviously the implication is they're not walking away from this one. Um, do you remember where the last place is that Butch Cassidy suggests that they go? They're kind of playing out like, yeah, we're going to escape again. We're going to get away again.
No, lay it on me.
Australia.
Of course. Of course.
We're going to make it to Australia. Good climate, nice beaches. You could learn to swim. It's one of the very last things they talk about. But in a larger sense, that sense of sacrifice that we see from so many of our characters, they're so often fighting to be the one to make the sacrifice. The big moment is Sawyer jumps from the chopper. And on the one hand, it's this selfless, heroic moment that we love him for, especially because our poor guy Hurley is looking so individually called out by the weight on the plane. It's like this really painful moment for him. And Sawyer goes, and he has some nice words about his daughter and a very steamy kiss for Kate. And that's all wonderful. But he's also kinda trying to run away. He's also kinda trying to escape this really real human emotional thing that he still has some work to do on. Fortunately, he's about to swim up to a woman with a bottle of rum, and she's gonna have a lot to teach him about connecting with that human inside. But yeah, that was it for me. The Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid reference felt very important.
Perfect, and I can't believe you were able to link it to the series so significantly as well with the Australia reference. Very well done, very well done. Karen, what about you?
Um, Pop culture is escaping me now because Randy said something about the sacrifices, so that got me on that kick for a
Mm,
second, so pardon me. But yeah,
that's
we
okay.
also have, not for nothing, but, Michael stays on the boat as the sacrifice
Mhm.
for
Mm,
to for the explosion for everybody else to get off of it. But also, when we see Ben throwing all the stuff into the what do you call it? So he can, he's
Oh, in
gonna
the
turn
vault.
the wheel and everything into the vault, right?
mm.
He's doing it to make like he's a big savior. I'm gonna fix this. I'm gonna move the island. I'm gonna do this. But he's really doing it out of jealousy because he don't want John to do it.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
he's just taking control from something. So he's making no sacrifice. Um, and John actually allows him to do it, and that's kind of sad. And but anyway, when you mentioned the sacrifices that were going on, there were a few in them in this, you know, big long episode. There was a few.
I love the idea too that Ben is running like Sawyer to a bit, right? Like it's easier to leave than to stay on the island and face the
Hmm.
future where he's no longer leader and John has taken over and he's further rejected by Jacob. I love that.
Yeah.
Dr. John, anything else you want to throw in?
Yeah, I'm just gonna go right back to the Alice in Wonderland well. We've got our time traveling bunnies, our white rabbits, if you will, and that's always popping up in Lost. And I do think that that final confrontation between Jack and Locke at the Orchid, as much as of course it's a callback to their famous it's never been easy confrontation in episode 201 orientation. To me, it really is the follow up to the white rabbit conversation they have around the fire where Jack is so close to believing, but can't quite get there. And then we have Locke sort of meeting him where he is, at least in White Rabbit, meeting him where he is and telling him, like, I'm a meat and potatoes guy. I don't believe in magic, but this place is
Mhm.
special. And I think we both know it. And here we are, I guess, 90 days later or something like that in Island Time, 4 seasons later. And now Locke is desperate. And he isn't sort of meeting Jack where he is, but Jack is also desperate. And he is not there for any of this.
Mm,
Mhm.
Locke is pulling from the same well and saying, Jack, and Jack does, but he refuses to actually let those feelings and that belief out. So,
Jack is
yeah,
stubborn.
Alice in Wonderland.
mhm.
He is
Mhm.
so
It's
stubborn.
Yeah.
yeah, and I have notes, and I should have just looked down at my notes because you literally said I have White Rabbit right here
Mm.
about the, uh, Locke and Jack conversation,
Mm,
and I put down that, it calls back to White Rabbit. So we've had similar thoughts on that, and that Locke knew Jack wasn't really ready to leave the island, although Jack is pushing to leave the island. He's
mm,
not really ready to go
mhm.
because he's not learned enough yet, right? So to speak. Jack hasn't learned fully yet to become awakened, and John's trying to keep him there. But that goes back to the connecting conversation of White Rabbit.
I love that. And I love how you mentioned earlier, we talked about how folks at home are likely having this debate. You're having your Jack and Locke conversations in the audience at home. And in this one, to your point, John, he doesn't really meet Jack where he's at. He needs him to believe. And so finally, when it's all said and done, and then neither of them are going to give any ground, Locke just says, I guess we'll see who's right. And we, the
Yep.
audience, finally get to see in about the most definitive sense we've had. Like we know Locke landed on the island and now he walks. Like we've got some stuff that we can say fairly definitively, but like we and the
Yeah.
characters all together watch the island blip out of existence. We watch it.
Yep.
It's there 1 second and it's gone the next. And for the first time, I think all series, there's some sort of a definitive statement about the mystical nature of that
Yeah.
island.
And Jack's another
Yeah.
one of those guys trying to be a martyr, right?
Right.
If you try to save everyone, you don't have what it takes.
And Jack deciding he's not gonna listen to John and just go ahead and leave, right? So simultaneously, we have Jack leaving and then the island, the island goes away, and Locke tells him, What you leaving is gonna eat you up inside, it's gonna eat you alive." And
Mhm.
that's exactly what happened when Jack left. He went back to pills and drinking, and it ate him alive, and he wanted to come back and go back to the island the whole time.
Mhm.
And what happened? John Locke had to go back to the real world, in quotes, I'm putting real world, and bring him back. So, John was right. It did eat him alive. He was not ready to
Mhm.
go.
We see, like, at the end of the episode there, Jack is still he sees the island disappear, and he still refuses to engage until Hurley says, "Come on, what did we just see happen, man?" And that's when he
Mhm.
finally says to everyone, "We have to lie," which is the thing that Locke says
Mhm.
Like
he
says,
has to do. And, one of the things connecting it back to White Rabbit that I've been thinking about is that in White Rabbit, the thing that Jack is chasing is the ghost of his father. But he's running toward the ghost of his father. So he's chasing
right.
this white rabbit. Is he hallucinating? Is
Yep.
it drugs? What's happening? But there is still a kind of openness and an orientation toward the island. And in this case, the white rabbit is maybe Jack running away from the island toward the helicopter, toward leaving. And the white rabbit is maybe something different, and he's not oriented toward the island until that moment when he sees it move and he suddenly realizes, oh, okay, let's at least lie about this then.
But what if the white
Mhm.
rabbit is just Jack trying to find himself?
Mhm. Yeah, it's that perpetual almost actually not even the
Right.
rabbit, it's like the carrot that leads the rabbit
Right. I
forward.
I have to, yeah, and that's why he's running after his father. He's not running away from him. He's
Yep.
still trying to get an answer to something, but, you know, Jack's trying to find himself again.
Love that.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I didn't really have a really strong one, but I couldn't help but, and it's a small bit of the episode. It sets up quite a bit for the future, but Juliet was giving us Jack Sparrow on the beach.
Yes.
Not she wasn't sloppy or silly, but she was just so resigned to be on that beach and to drink her rum, um, because nothing else matters now. When she utters to Sawyer, "I'm not celebrating," and she's so it's not defeated, it's not sorrowful, it's just right here. It's just, like, sort of numb neutral that she's
Yep.
giving. Yeah, and it's giving a deserted like, a Jack Sparrow who's been on the island before and knows that when you're marooned, it's likely you're gonna be here a while, and so we'll sit back with our rum.
Yeah, I decided not to do a "Do You Ship It" segment this time around because we had so much ground to cover. But, like, we get this moment where it's on. Like, if you weren't sure that Sawyer and Juliet was a thing, like, it now. But there's a nice little moment I clocked earlier in the episode, when Jack is saying, like, "Juliet removed my appendix 2 days ago." And Sawyer says, "You're kidding me." And probably the first time I watched that, I was thinking more like, "Oh, yeah, there goes Jack again. Gotta go running through the jungle, bleeding from his abdomen." But this time around, I was like, "Damn, she removed an appendix in the jungle? It's pretty cool." It felt like a
It's
little
magical.
twang to me. Yeah, a miracle even.
Magical.
Alright, so this is the season 4 finale. We are a full season into, uh, you know, Carlton and Damon getting the green light to end this series, right? We're gonna wrap it up, on our own terms as best we can. Um, and this episode, like, the main thing I thought about, apart from just how often they're pointing guns at each other, I was really starting to laugh at it about halfway through because I forgot just how often it happens in this particular episode, even in the dream sequence. Um, but no, it's just they're setting up so many dynamics and moments and things that they're going to continue to explore and pay off all the way up through the finale. There are almost too many to count. I almost kind of stole one just now talking about Juliet and Sawyer. Apologies. So let me turn to our guest, Karen, give her the first crack at this one. What is one of the most important things they set up in this finale for the future of the series?
I'm not wavering off the John and Jack, parallel, or mirror, okay, because it's that the 2 of them, that dichotomy, that's what that's what's gonna have that explosive end for us. But it takes John to do what he has to do throughout the whole rest of the series to bring Jack back, because John is the key to get Jack to learn to let go, become enlightened or awakened or whatever you wanna call it. Um, so even though people will see, uh, Locke in a different light, so to speak, later on, that's to me, it's always John Locke, and he's still fulfilling his
Mhm.
role to help Jack, stubborn Jack, learn what he needs to learn. So I think that that's set up beautifully because, again, we're gonna have funerals and we're gonna have, we're seeing a lot of from now on, a lot of life, death, and rebirth imagery from now till the end. So it becomes quite obvious where we're going with it. But the whole pairing of John and Jack, for me, that's everything.
Yeah.
And that does lead us to the end.
Mm.
Yeah. Kris, how about you? You can piggyback off of that one, or you might have another direction you wanna go. Those are both okay.
I'm gonna pivot because the one that I had in mind is I think a significant one, and I hope I'm not stealing a big one, but time travel. We are squarely in the realm of time travel now. Is he saying what talking about what I think he's talking about?
Is
You
that
mean
what you
time
think it is, time travel?
well, there is some, like, at
Mhm.
least
Yes, yes,
yeah, like John will,
If you mean
travel 3 years
time-traveling
into the
bunnies,
future, right?
yes.
Not
then
just the
yes.
island spinning out, but un unbelievable to have it sort of stated and then paid we can't be prepared for exactly how much timey-wiminess is going to come into this show as we're skipping through history, but, yeah, it's gonna drive so much of what makes the show complicated, and challenging in the future seasons, but also really, really interesting.
John, how about for you? What's your favorite thing they set up for the future?
So I think it's all things Ben. Yeah, I could easily have pointed to Jack and Locke as well. Of course, I love Jack's arc in the final season and all of that. But I think, we were talking about sacrifice earlier and what does Ben sacrifice? And there is this moment in this episode where he pushes a donkey wheel and you really feel for him because there's a sense that maybe he never can return home, which for him is the island. Of course, he leaves and immediately begins scheming how to get back for the next, and that's his next 3 years. And I haven't, I'm not sure if I've said this on the pod before, but season 4 is my favorite season. I love its structure. I love the flash forwards. It's not just about moving the show forward beyond the structure of the flashback. It's also just the way that it suddenly uses the flash forward as a way to build suspense and tell stories sometimes in even weirder, non chronological, non-linear order. So all season here, we've had, Ben is the mastermind behind Saeed's assassinations. And then suddenly Ben is appearing in the desert with a parka before leaving and we finally get the answer to what's happening and why this happens in the finale. So I love that the finale sort of pays off all of what happened in the rest of season 4, but then all things Ben moving forward, manipulating everyone to get back to the island, his treatment of Locke at the end of it all, and then of course his ultimate redemption in the series finale. This for me is all set up and seated in this episode or this set of episodes. And I am going to do a classic smuggle and talk a little bit more about the Wizard of Oz here. and in the fourth book of the Wizard of Oz series, Dorothy and the Wizard in Oz. Despite the fact that in the first book we have the wizard seemingly leave Oz forever in his balloon, never to return, right? He's left, he's the charlatan, he's the man in charge, he's gone. And then in the second book, we have the reveal of his sort of villainy and kidnapping of this child. Anyway, in book 4, he's kind of forgiven. He's back in Oz. Everything's okay. And what happens is that he has this arc where he goes from charlatan to ultimately the court wizard for Princess Ozma. And so here's a quote from Ozma. She says, "We owe a great deal to the wonderful wizard, for it was you who built this splendid emerald city, you who ruled it wisely and well for many years and made the people proud of your magical art. So as you are now too old to wander abroad and work in a circus, I offer you a home here as long as you live. You shall be the official wizard of my kingdom and be treated with every respect and consideration." Which he, of course, responds with, "I accept your kind offer with gratitude, gracious princess," this little man said in a soft voice, and they could see the teardrops that were standing in his keen old eyes. It meant a good deal to him to secure a home like this, to be home. And then the last bit of this quote is Dorothy says, "He's only a humbug wizard, though," smiling at him. And then Ozma replies, "And that is the safest kind of wizard to have." So getting Ben on your side, whether he's a charlatan or not, that is the safest wizard. So I just love this connection here because I do feel like it actually speaks to Ben's ultimate redemption. Again, Ozma being Hurley and all that.
Mhm.
I really love what this episode sets up for Ben.
Yeah. No, so perfect. And for me, I'm just gonna kinda bring it back to where Karen started us with, uh, Jack and Locke, and I think Karen said all the most important things about that, but that's the beating heart of the show for me. John Locke is my favorite character. Obviously the show wants us to know that he is a flawed man as well, like everyone on the island. Um, and I was so excited to watch his redemption arc on this show, and it wound up not being anything like what I thought it would be. He gets the most horrific and tragic ending of maybe almost anyone on the entire show. And any work he gets to do really doesn't happen until the Flash sideways, until this world that they've built together. And if you had told me that in advance, I might have been disappointed, but it's beautiful and how harsh and real it is. But when they have that meetup at the Orchid Station, and John says, "We'll just have to see." Flash forward to the series finale. He was right. He was right about everything. You're wearing his face and you disgrace his name. That, apart from the obvious stuff that rips into your soul, that was one of my most emotional moments of the finale. My guy John Locke being recognized that there was some goodness with him. Yes, he was manipulated and taken advantage of and pushed in the wrong direction, but I knew there was a man that I loved in there, and I loved that the series ultimately recognized that, and they really tee it up perfectly here.
Beautifully stated, beautifully stated. I know how much you love Locke. I've got one smuggle before we move on because I didn't want to
Yeah.
include it as my number 1 because I'm not sure it's the most important or high pressure, but I noticed in this one, Jin has to make that choice to walk away and let Michael make the sacrifice. Michael says, "You're a husband and a father. You gotta
Mhm.
go." And he goes. And I feel like that's prior to that, I was frustrated with Jin. Hearing him say to son, "I told you I'd get you off this island." They're all so paternalistic. They're not just patriarchal, they're
Yeah.
paternalistic. Like, "What do you mean? You didn't do like, this is all happening. You're all in this together. And yes, you're getting off the island, but, like, you didn't fulfill some promise, and that doesn't matter. That's okay." After this moment, he lets Michael make that sacrifice. Jin, as a husband, Jin the man I'm sorry, yeah, Jin the man that Sun will come back to when they finally reunite is a totally different, kind of open-handed person who's ready to collaborate with a partner, who's just there to truly support a person rather than, like, validate himself through providing for that person. This was the beginning of a really important turn from one of my favorite characters in the show.
Yeah.
So, yeah, shouts to Jin. So these episodes do some important stuff for Lost. They set up some of the best future dynamics. They also don't get it all right. So we'll have a little bit of fun. Let's go through maybe the worst things that this episode either sets up or maybe sets up and then fails to pay off. John Aspler, we'll go to you first.
All right. So I would love to talk about Michael at some point, but I think I'm going to instead talk about Sun. I love badass Sun in this episode. She is fantastic. Everything she
Mhm.
does off island, from taking over her father's company to confronting Widmore and possibly trying to get on side with him to get revenge. All of this works for me. Um, and of course, what ultimately happens is that her arc collapses into a search for Jin for 2 full seasons, culminating in possibly one of the worst episodes of Lost, in my view, The Package, where she forgets how to speak English because she gets bonked on the head. All of this
Mhm.
is very, very frustrating to me when we see what's happening in this particular episode. And I just want to back it up a little bit more with some music analysis from a friend of mine. I don't know if any of you have watched
Nice.
a YouTuber named Fringe Music 107. His name's Jim in real life. He's got fantastic music analysis of Lost videos that he is still making 20 years later. And the most recent video from 5 months ago is it's titled Lost Storytelling in Music, Sun's Revenge, aka Sun Quan's Gun Bonbons. And he analyzes a new theme that is introduced in this episode that he calls Son's Revenge theme, and it only appears 7 times in the show. In this episode, and then in early season 5, and then it just disappears for the rest of the series. And I think
Mm.
that for me is really the encapsulation of the failure of this particular potential exciting arc. At the beginning of season 5, this is still going on. She's still so interesting, making these fascinating and strange choices that I love, and then she just basically says, "Where is Jin? Where is Jin? Where is Jin?" for the whole rest of the series, and that bums me out. but the fact that that musical cue is only there in early season 5 and then it's gone, I think that's really fascinating. So yeah, check out Fringe Music 107. He's cool.
Brilliant stuff. Absolutely love that. Um, so interesting that that translated to the music as not just the writing, but the music too. I'm gonna have to listen to that.
Yeah.
Karen, what about you? Anything that you wanted to shout down as opposed to shout out?
No, not I actually didn't, but jumping off of the son thing, but for me, I felt like we got to see enough badass son to
Mm.
know that she's capable of being that badass,
Yeah.
and
Hmm. Hmm.
she's very capable. We learned that she was a child, she broke the ballerina thing, and she was able to lie about it, so
Mm.
she knows how to get through life, okay? But ultimately, her and Jin's was a love story, so grief and a broken heart, that's what drove her after losing Jin. And
Mm.
again, that's what I took from that. In other words, grief is freaking paramount. It's
Mm.
Yeah.
horrific. And so we have grief, but true love, and they have to save each other. But she just but she wants revenge. She wants Jack to pay. But it's for me. That's where I got that. But as far as a downside to anything in the episode? No, not really.
Yeah.
I again, just go with the flow with the whole thing and, you know, um, when the time comes, I want more Frank Lapidus, because
Yeah. There you go.
he's
Yeah.
fun,
There you
when the
go.
time comes.
That's a perfect answer. That
That's a
counts.
great one. Yeah.
I just yeah, Frank Lapidus,
I,
so,
I want
um,
more of his perfect facial hair and hair combination. I was
Oh,
watching these
man.
most recent episodes. I'm like, how does he get that perfect
it's
long? It's fantastic.
I was in an
When all the
elevator with him. I was in an elevator with him in Nashville. And my god, he looks he's, like, perfect. Everything is
Yes.
perfect. He
Oh,
had a
okay.
hat on, but everything was I'm like, "How?
Yeah.
How?"
So glad to hear
And
that because when we see clean cut Lapidus later, it's not the same. So I'm glad to know
Oh,
yeah.
in real
no.
life he's rocking the
No,
Perfect.
he's so cool. I love it in this episode when like Kimi and the freaking terrifying band of people come back and they catch him trying to break out. I'd be like terrified. And he's just kind of like, damn it, like he's just so like cool about it. Like, this sucks. That I mean, I
I
guess
just
he
love me
kind of
some
knows they need him, but
Yeah. But I just give me some more Frank Lapidus. We didn't get enough
yeah.
Frank.
Perfect. Perfect. So you're the opposite of Jack. You've enjoyed this
yeah,
and you do hope you'll see each other again.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
why not? Why
Yeah.
not?
Randy, what about you, bud?
As you know, I love Lost, but I do wish they had found a better way to pay off creepy Claire. Because I was willing to go down that road, when she first shows up in the shack and she shows up in that dream sequence. I remember at the time I was a little bit disappointed because, like this show started, had a huge crush on Claire, of course. And I bring this up every episode of Lost and Lit because it remains one of the most important moments on the show to me. I love her so much in season one. That moment where she just grabs Jin's hand, makes him feel baby Aaron kicking in her belly is like there's a version of this show where she's just as much the heart and soul as Hurley. And I always feel like we kind of lost our shot at that. And like
She's the
there are some
light. She's the light. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And they do some things well, and right, and like she gets to reconnect. She gets this great plot line with Kate, which is so nice to see them coming together and caring about each other. But yeah, like creepy dream sequence Spectre Claire wasn't my favorite direction, but still love this show, and they landed the plane.
So is it the whole of Claire becoming Rousseau that what you weren't feeling?
Yeah, it wasn't my favorite. It wasn't my favorite direction, but just because and it's a little bit me projecting what I wanted from the character, so
We all
if
get
you
what
take
we
I mean, what other character
um
has a baby like 45 times? I mean,
yes. One sugar plum fairy, two sugar plum fairies.
I have a question for you guys.
Yeah.
Which character do you identify with the most?
Mm.
John, what about you? We'll start with John.
Oh man. Oh no, this is tough. Probably Jack. I'm we'll just go with agnostic, I guess. And but I find Jack's arc so compelling, and I am a stubborn person who wants to fix things and get things right, and am a bit of a perfectionist. And I see those flaws magnified for television in Jack. And as much as I mentioned that, of course, Lost is a roadmap of how not to be a bad dad, it's also a bit of a roadmap of how to deal with letting go of the things you can't fix. And so, um, without the sort of journey to faith component of it, the sort of more learning to let go part of Jack's arc is really, really meaningful to me. And I don't know that I've necessarily learned to let go, but it's certainly something that speaks to me quite a bit.
Chris, what about you?
If I'm being honest, there's probably a different answer for different seasons of my life. There's probably a different answer for different facets of my personality. Um, like I want in that Lock Jack dichotomy, I'm more of a Lock. Like I do tend to um yeah, want to believe in sort of the purpose of a thing. The sort of the bigger, grander, greater transcendence of it all. But probably I can identify with Mr. Echo to an extent, and this is the first time I'm
Nice.
really putting my finger on that. But um, in two ways, I think I have made the mistake of being really so deep in the sort of lock of it all. The idea that things have purpose, and I have a. It's important that I find my purpose and place, and that um, I do what I can to be good. That has been something that was been important to me in life, and I have, like Echo, sort of put punishments upon myself, sort of penance that I think I need to pay in order to eventually become worthy again.
Mm,
Um, and I have a positive view on where Echo lands, and I think it's where my own spiritual faith journey has brought me over the years to a place of like real peace that comes from believing that there is something grander and greater. But also that within that, there is this, like, this grace that we're all messy, that we're all making mistakes, that we're all taking one step forward, maybe half a
yeah.
step back, but we keep moving forward. When Locke stands there in front of the smoke monster, he finally is ready to say, like, "Yeah, you know what? I did things. I made mistakes. I did what I had to do when I had to do them, and I hope I can be a better person moving forward, but, uh,
Mm.
yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not sorry, kind of, right? Because he's learned to let go. He's learned to let go of the regret and the self-punishment that comes with
Mhm.
that. So, I hope
Yeah.
on my best days, I'm somewhere near that.
I would have loved to have gotten a lot more Mr. Echo,
Mm,
because I
Oh,
loved
yeah.
that character. Yeah.
not just a
Um,
disembodied presence playing
yeah.
chess with Hurley.
But yeah, but it was I thought it was a very powerful character. Hey, Randy, what about you?
Yeah, this is such a brilliant question because I think something that people who love Lost have in common is we're so willing to look at our own vulnerabilities and our own imperfections and want to work on them. Because I've got to say, it's John Locke. I hope that I am less easy to manipulate. I hope I am not amenable to coercion like John Locke. Um, but he feels things in such a big way. He sees such a big abstract world and he so desperately wants people to see it with him. And when he's on, he's really on. And when I'm on, I'm really on. Um, but it's also, if I'm being honest, it's easy to shake my confidence. And you see John Locke struggle with that time and time again. And you see that frustration. He's wrong about so many things, just as I am. But even when he's so right about something, that feeling that he can't quite say or communicate the right thing to get everyone on board with him. I see myself in that. And sometimes it's a beautiful thing.
But that's life. Life
Mhm.
is beautiful, and we have to just deal with the doses of ugly as it comes. And
Mhm.
other than that, you if we could, I hate to sound like all like a hippie and everything, but if we could wake up every day with a smile and go, "Hey, dude, we're just gonna go with the flow today, and whatever happens, happens. I
Mhm.
got this." Life is much easier.
Yep.
Sometimes you got to deal with the crap, and then you go, "Okay, but how do I handle the crap with the grace and gratitude so that I come out the other
Mhm.
side okay?" And that's it. For me, I'm John Locke.
Yeah.
Yeah. I am absolutely not amendable for coercion because I grew up in New York City, so I got street smarts. You can't put nothing past me in
Mhm.
that regard. But the other part of the feeling of connectivity, of of connectivity to, um, he says the island, for me, it's the universe. For,
Yep.
Mm,
um,
mhm,
the connectivity to people and situations. I always want to help, but I can't help but always keep falling backwards. I am the John Locke that takes the 3 steps forward, 2 steps back.
mm,
Um, but then again, that's still part of why I gotta do what I gotta do while I'm here on this plane here right now, and just learn my way and just be a better Karen than I was yesterday. That's all I can try to do. And if I can help people along the way or inspire them or, mm, you know, do something in that regard to make somebody else's day better or show them the way to something, then that's good. But on the other side, like I said, that I seem to always keep that I stumble back. But that's my I don't know why that happens. Sometimes it could be based in fear from growing
mm,
up that, oh, maybe I'm afraid to take certain steps forward or whatever. But a lot of that personality trait that John has, except for the being able to be conned, I seem
Mhm.
to I seem to very much identify with. I'm not special, and but yet I feel like there's things I need to do to
mhm.
share
Mhm.
with the world. But it's going to be what it's going to be. So John Locke it is for me.
Love that. You have your place and your purpose one day at a time. Love that.
That's it. That's all I can do.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that was such an important conversation, and it helped us get even deeper into the themes of this episode. We're starting to shift into the end game of the discussion, where we like to hit just some of our faves. There's so much we're not going to get to touch tonight. We've covered a lot, but I thought we could go next to. I was just hoping everyone could share one of their favorite quotes from the episode. I think we've managed to snuggle some of them in. Um, I I wasn't sure where to go first, but Karen looked so excited. I've got to go to Karen first on this one for sure. Karen,
I know
what's a favorite quote?
your audience can't see my reactions to all these things. I'm very silly. They have no idea how silly I am. Um, it's a Sawyer. And,
Hmm.
he realizes that now he's gotta go back out and help Jack look for whatever you've ever had. He's like, you don't get to die alone. So that's my
Hmm.
quote. He knows because if you don't keep tabs on Jack, he's a hothead. He just keeps going. But I love when Sawyer says that. I'll go with you, but you don't get to die alone.
Mm,
Yep.
perfect.
Yeah, twisting that iconic phrase back on him is such
Yeah.
a chef's kiss moment. Let's see. John, how about for you? What's one of your favorite quotes from the episode?
Yeah, so for me, it's gonna go to Sun. I feel that Sun, or maybe Yunjin Kim, is the MVP of this episode. The like shriek from the chopper is just like an absolutely astonishing moment. But reflecting on the worst dynamic, or maybe the most promising dynamic that for me didn't get paid off. It's all because I love Sun and Jin so much as characters.
Yep.
And so for me, the quote here is when they're right at the beginning, they're on the plane, and Jack is telling them that
Mhm.
we don't have to
Yes.
answer every question. They'll think that we're in shock. And Sun says, "We are in shock, Jack." Perfect, perfect line and perfect delivery.
Yeah, that was on my list as well. And just such an insight into Jack being like, "Oh, great. That we're in shock. Great. That'll make it easier because he's gotta put up that strong front." Ugh. Chris, how about for you?
I was gonna speak to Juliet, but I've already mentioned it. I
Mhm.
love the way she delivers that line to Sawyer. Like, I'm not celebrating, but I'll circle back to Son myself. I love when she confronts her father in his very office, this place of power for him, this place of dominance. And she stands in front of him looking as confident as we've ever seen her. And she looks him in the eyes. And after receiving his immediate patriarchal nonsense, the same old
Yep.
bullshit she's dealt with her whole life. And she's like, I'm just not that girl anymore, bro.
Yep.
And she gives him a good little speech, but when she finishes with, now you will respect me.
Mhm.
Because that's how he has consistently reminded her of her place in the world. I am your father. You will respect me. There's not even nowhere else. It's just a fact. And now she's like, well, I know how your world works, and I have a controlling stake in your company. So now you will
Mhm.
respect me. And again, perfectly delivered. So Just love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, no hug for her dad when she steps off that cargo plane. It's just her mom, and we understand why. I was so relieved, that John picked that son quote because that was on my list, and that's gonna make my decision a little bit easier. So I'm gonna go with, this is Benjamin Linus. He delivers this in just a real, like, shit kicking way, like he's being an asshole to John Locke. He's trying to regain his confidence and his sense of himself as a smooth operator after killing Kimi. But he says sometimes good command decisions get compromised by bad emotional responses. Is his way to try to put this into a nuts and bolts explanation, and I love it for two reasons. Because on the one hand, we know him so well at this point. We know he's trying to convince himself that that's what happened. He's trying to detach from it. Like we can see those gears turning in his head. He's trying to do these mental gymnastics to like talk himself back into scheming mode. And that's part of the reason I love it because I think it's a deep character moment hidden within a snarky little response to John. But the other reason I love it is like that could almost be like a mission statement for Lost. Like that's pretty much the plot of most Lost episodes. Good command decisions, getting compromised by bad emotional responses. That's been a big part of our conversation tonight. Those emotions get in the way of people who might be otherwise making great decisions. We spend the most time centering Jack in that conversation, but he's not alone there. That's for sure.
Great pick. Absolutely love that. I think, um, I love that you said it sort of describes the entire series in a certain way. Um, I think in a lot of ways, these 3 episodes contain a lot of distillations of what makes Lost great. Some of the characters are out there like most potent, most, I think John, earlier you said this is your favorite season of Lost, and I was having a similar feeling. Watching this 3-episode finale, I thought, "Wow, you could show just these 3 episodes to somebody with no other context, and they will enjoy what they see on screen. They'll have a ton of questions, and they will absolutely wanna watch the rest of this series." It is like the perfect little promo package,
Yeah.
and so much of what makes the series great lives within this episode, so really cool. Alright, that's quotes, that's the writing. Let's talk about, some of the cinematography or production. We'll do everybody's favorite shot sequence or some other artistic choice in the episode. Um, we did Karen first before, so I guess we'll go to John first this time. John, what do you got?
Feel like I'm gonna steal an obvious one from everyone, but it is the opening, everyone returns home, Oceanic 6 get off the plane shot, or series of shots. It's one of those moments that the show doesn't always do this, but it really gives everything over to the music so that there is no on-screen audio. There's even like sort of slow-mo shots of people moving around. Lost does this in its finales, often at the end of the finale, but to do it at the beginning of the finale was extremely cool. The name of the theme, the music that plays, the cue that plays over this sequence is called "There's No Place Like Home." So it's the title of the episode. It is
Yeah.
the Oceanic Six returning home. And again, I've been chatting with Jim, the guy who does the music analysis, and he was talking about how over the rest of the 3 seasons, this musical cue starts to not only be sort of this literal, like, Oceanic Six returns home theme, but starts to be more of like a represents home in a spiritual sense, and not just a literal one, and that's what it comes back to over and over and over again, this idea of home, which is, of course, at the heart of this episode. So I will take that sequence right at the beginning.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you did. That reframes that sequence a bit for me. I think next time I watch, I'll focus more on the music and less on Jack's mom's mouth kiss. Ka Karen, we'll go to you next.
How about how about Jack's mother's mouth kiss? I mean,
That was a choice.
what
That was a
well,
choice.
I'm gonna go with that. Um,
Yes.
you know what shot I appreciated Jack giving the eulogy shot,
Hmm.
Mm,
um, because he waited for that moment for so long, and I think visually we're seeing Jack in that vulnerable state where he's trying to connect. I don't have my dad anymore, and, he does say I love him and everything, but the shot of him being vulnerable and trying to get those words out and being quite eloquent on it, and for a split second, we do get a shot of everyone sitting in the pews,
mm.
and for a minute, it's like I f and this is me being my off the wall metaphoric type of Karen, okay? is when we get that moment and we have everyone laid out, standing out in front of him, sitting. It's like all these little aspects of Jack feel like they all joined in the place he needed them all to be for that one moment. And it was in that
Yes.
one shot. And it was in that one shot. Little do we know that we're going to have, at the end, we're going to be in a sanctuary with the people who
Mhm.
helped him get to the point that he needed to wake up. So for that one moment, I felt like that shot was really telling me, I look what we get to look forward to later on.
I
'Cause it's
love
Jack
that.
in the church, yeah, with his talking about his father, but we have other people in the church with him, and it's a split second showing of the parishioners there for a second, and I'm like, "Okay." I thought it was shot very beautifully, and it's not that it was this extravagant shot, it's not
Mm,
that it was you know, oh, the scenery of the island, or it wasn't, it was what it meant for me in that moment,
mm.
and how it connected that, okay, Jack's starting to make connections to where he
Yeah.
needs to go. But you don't quite get there yet.
Yeah, with the hindsight of the series as a whole, that's a really fantastic call out. I love that. Randy, what about you? Something you've got in mind?
Yeah, I just wanna say how much I love Karen's point because 'cause I've never actively factored in, like, this episode in that moment, but yeah, like, if this Flash Sideways is a place we built together, like, in that moment, Jack's certainly not all the way there, he's commenting on the fact that he still doesn't get to bury his father, but, like, he does say some emotionally intelligent things in that speech, like, he really is trying to take some positive baby steps toward, like, closure and acceptance. And yeah, maybe they never get that church sequence if Jack doesn't have this. Like that's part of their collective unconscious that's coming together, which is so beautiful. So now that I spoke to that, I kind of want to just talk about Terry O'Quinn's face and physicality as a whole, because I just feel like I'd follow him anywhere. But I'm just going to go with an obvious fun one because it had been a minute since I watched this episode. I love Saeed so much. Um, on a regular basis, I just think about him using his legs to murder an other while he is tied up. Um, and I had like genuinely like forgotten about this intensive Saeed v Kimi fight sequence. And when Saeed just, like, pops into frame, I was just like, "Let's fucking go." And I was, like, back to my own self, like, almost 20 years ago now, just being like, "Yes!" So yeah, that I'm just gonna say that fight sequence, it's a really freaking fun fight sequence. Saeed's so cool. Um, you trust him, and it's great. I was so happy to have that surprise and watch it with fresh eyes.
Great pick. Yeah, when Saeed throws that tackle out of the jungle, it's on.
I feel like now that we've gone around, I we can't move on without at least talking about all of the chopper shots or the chopper on chopper shots. Like, I
Mm,
was hoping someone else was gonna take it
Mm,
since I took the '06 arriving, but, like, there are always
mhm.
so many beautiful, like, sweeping vistas and water work and all that stuff on the show, but, like, they had a helicopter moving around all episode, and there are just such great shots of it taking off on the island of, like there's this one shot where the chopper is going, and there's a shot from above, like, where as if another chopper is moving in the opposite direction
mm.
to take the shot. Like, just yeah, I truly incredible work for a broadcast television show.
Love
Amazing.
love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, even the crash, the helicopter crash looks really, really good. Um, I had a couple in mind, but, like, I wanted to at one point, I was gonna celebrate the set design of the wheel itself. It's the
Mm.
first time we've seen this cold environment on the island. It's this whole new space for us, and Ben's gotta put on a parka. That was just, like, really beautiful. I thought about possibly talking about the most messed up sequence across 3 episodes, maybe the most messed up idea anybody in the series has, and that's Hurley's surprise birthday party sequence, where you get this, like, horror movie moment. He kinda,
Yes.
is wandering through the house. He's doing the classic horror movie thing where he's like, "Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this?" As he grabs the Jesus Christ statue. Um W The coconut is so mysterious. We know the show is kinda weird. We're all like, "What the hell is happening now?" Really awful, awful thing that his family did. So tone deaf. So not my favorite sequence. I wanna celebrate, like Randy, some of the action here. When I ran through these 3 episodes, I said, "You know what?" I think I said before, some of the elements of the show are at their most potent. All of the other action in this episode, they're so the others. They're coming out of nowhere with, like, quiet zip ties to, assassinate an operator, right? These like special forces guys are being taken down one by one. Um, they're doing light signals with mirrors.
Mhm.
Ben hasn't communicated with anybody in God knows how long, but he can count on the fact that somebody is like disciplined and stationed on that hillside, waiting for potentially someday somebody to shine a light at them. All of what the others are on the island, even to the point where then at the end they receive John Locke in and they're looking at him up with reverence, and you get this idea of this weirdly culty community of like very deadly people. The others are maybe never more others than they are in this episode or these 3 episodes.
Yeah, you get the sense that, like, this group of others is, like, so sick of the new Otherton others. Like, we're not just a bunch of suburban, weaklings. Like, we are the badasses in the jungle, and you will remember it.
They are the Whispers at one point, and, the show establishes the Whispers as something else more sort of supernatural as you hear them on the ship and you hear them later. But when they're surrounding the GI, the first thing you hear are the Whispers, and the operators know that they're in trouble.
All right. So one segment we often do is called Hindsight is 2020. It's a little bit different than like looking at like sweeping storylines and things like that. This is a segment where we always frame it as we don't think that we know better than the creative team. That's not the goal of this exercise. The goal is not to criticize the show. It's to explore why we love the show so much and just try to capture a moment that we could have imagined going differently. And sometimes this might tie to a meaningful character beat, and other times it might just be a joke. So, for instance, I'm going to go first. I don't believe Kate would have given up on finding Jin. That bums me out every time. That's it. That's all. Uh, we know where that story goes, and I'm not even blaming the writers. I just in that moment, I don't think Kate would let even stubborn Jack pull her onto that chopper. Chris, how about you?
One of my favorite quotes was when Linus is over Kimi. Kimi, with his dying words, tells him, like, "There's nowhere you can go. Widmore will find you." And Ben coolly delivers, "Not if I find him first." And I
Hmm.
didn't pick that for my favorite quote because ultimately the show doesn't pay off the Widmore Linus rivalry as like sort of like it feels like that is the ultimate kind of big picture conflict that everybody else is swept up in
Hmm.
at this point, and it never quite gets there. So I think if I'm I have a feeling if the writers could go back, they may de-emphasize some of the direct Widmore versus Linus of it all, as opposed to just a power monger looking for the power of
Sure.
the island looking to preserve itself. Distilling it to those 2 individuals maybe doesn't pay off so well in the end.
Beautiful. Karen, do you have any small moments like this?
Well, there's times that I will sit there and go, "Oh, why couldn't I find out more about blah, 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 blah?"
Sure.
I remember originally that, okay, so John's told he has to move the island, and he doesn't because he's amenable for coercion, so Ben takes it over. And Ben
Mhm.
just nonchalantly relinquishes, "Okay, now you're in charge of the island and others. You could just go
Yep.
go ahead, you be in charge." It was so flippant, like, whatever. I'll move I'll put the parker on and go there." And I felt like the whole thing, and then John goes and he sees, the others, and they're looking at him, but there's no, like, why did they, wanna honor him so much? They were like, "What does John do now?" There was, like, no follow-up to any of that. So I'm
Yeah.
like, I felt like that was kind of all just kinda like, you know, alright, I know I have to get John to not turn the wheel, and I have to make Ben do it. I get the writing says we have to do this, but I felt like that whole
Mhm.
avenue to get through all this stuff left so many things unsaid, and maybe it was just my own idea of, like, I need to know more because I need to
Yeah.
fill in the gaps in my blog to know I
Mm.
have answers.
Yeah, it's like they
Mhm.
had a vague idea of what they wanted to do with that, so they sort of, like, softly launched it, and
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
"We'll get back around
right,
to that eventually."
right, and
Season
at
5
that, like I
stuff.
said, yeah, at that point, at that moment, I remember watching it originally going, I feel like I didn't get anything from that." Like, okay, so John don't do what he's supposed to do, so now is he happy he's in charge of all the others now? Because that's I just felt like it was left. Obviously, we have a whole other avenue we go down later on, but, yeah, there are times as much as I love every episode and everything about them, that I'm not sitting there going, "Eh, that was."
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah,
you
I
know,
think especially because you're not getting him in any of the flash forwards, so you're not getting any sort of, like, post all of this information about
mm,
John. There is yeah, that's interesting to s it is kind of vague what's happening with
it's
him, and
yeah,
at that point, you think he's more important than that, so it's like, why isn't this finale focusing more
yeah.
on
Yes.
John?
But then again, if when we go a little further down the line, then we realize John's importance really is because of the circumstances that he was left with on the island. His real role was he had to go back to get Jack and the other people to
Mhm,
bring them back. So that was the
Mhm.
priority.
mhm.
And that really was the goal later on. But as you're watching it first run, you're like, what happened?
It doesn't hit.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yep.
What happened? Yeah. So, but I felt like there was
Absolutely.
always there was always some sort of payoff further down the line. At least I knew that they connected dots later on,
Yes.
and it always made sense.
Perfect. John, hindsight is 2020. What's your small edit?
So I was actually originally going to go with some of the sort of like Hurley fat content, but just the
Mhm.
conversation you were just having twigged to me that just talking about John Locke, I've always been so annoyed about the fact that the characters just keep calling him Jeremy Bentham. It's totally unrealistic. It's
Yeah.
not how they would refer to him. I do appreciate that Hurley lampshades it to Saeed, right? So
Mhm.
Saeed calls him Bentham, and Hurley's like, "That's stupid." But the scene with Kate and Jack, that is a moment for me that fully takes me out of the drama of it when we revisit the "we have to go back" moment, and she calls him, or they both call him Jeremy Bentham, and I'm like, that no one would do that. No one ever would do that. And yeah, I would love for
Yeah.
them to have found a different way to preserve the twist without making that dialogue ultimately feel kind of
Silly.
very unrealistic.
Yeah, and
Silly, yeah,
silly. Yeah.
totally.
Silly. Yeah, it's almost like they could have been more vague in a way that made you feel like the him, the he they were talking about was like Ben. You know, Ben Linus, maybe we know Ben had left the island, so we could have been filling in that gap falsely.
Right. Because
Good
the
call.
minute we see who it is, we know it's John Locke, so just call him John Locke.
Yeah, and yeah, to your point, like, no, that's like psycho stuff for these people to be referring to a person they know so well and have been through so much with by this, like, weird alias for no reason.
Get the net. Get the net, Santa Rosa's calling.
Yeah, right. We did it. We were able to be somewhat critical, but I'm glad we've had so much fun, like, loving on this episode. And this, for us at Media Lit, is the ultimate way for us to love on the properties we talk about. Um, we get to pick an item, one prop from this episode, these 3 episodes, that we would love to be able to take home. Um, this can be something big, this can be something small. Randy and I, as hosts, have some parameters that we must follow, but you 2 are free to choose as you will. Given the association with the Getting Lost doc and Cancer Gets Lost and, their charities of all things or their auctions, I should say, of all things lost, this feels particularly potent, this episode, so I'm excited to play this little game. Let's go first to Karen. One prop. What would it
One
be?
prop, if I could take it home with me, Juliet's bottle of rum.
Perfect.
Yes.
Perfect. I love how simply labeled all things are. Like it's like sort of those ironic 90s things. Like you're wearing like the shirt says man, the milk says milk. Perfect. It's just
Yeah,
rum.
yeah,
This
yeah.
is Dharma rum. Having had a Dharma beer at the movie theater for the documentary, I
Yes.
appreciate the Dharma rum. John Aspler.
So, yeah, it took me a while to figure it out, but I think the answer is the dead man switch. It's a perfect accessory to wear under your clothes that no one will ever know you're wearing. Super fun to pull out at a party and tell people there's a dead man switch. I think it's great.
Make sure you're doing your bicep curls. You know, you're gonna bust that thing out, you're gonna make sure. Randy, what about you?
Yeah, so regular listeners to the show will know this has become quite a spectacle. We each have a full prop cave full of things we pulled from different properties. There are different rooms and designations, and I've tried to be reserved. Recently, I've tried to pick some pretty subtle and reasonable items, but I'm going to be a little obvious and a little bit flashy today because in our prop caves we each have a garage. Um, and Kris has, the 92 Tim Burton Batmobile, and, like, if we're ever gonna go for a drive together, like, I need something that can at least try to keep up, so I'm taking Hurley's Camaro.
Mhm.
I'm going big or going home. I'm taking Hurley's Camaro. and I'll be so proud to take a spin in it.
I am so jealous. That is a phenomenal pick. It it makes me wanna take the helicopter, I guess. I'm not going to, but I wanna, like, sort of counter that. Amazing. Great, great pick. Um, only once in the year do we get to Randy and I pick sort of a whole room or a whole set from a property to port into our own prop cave, and I'm not
Mhm.
doing it this week, but
Ah.
I consider the donkey wheel, the whole frozen cave. But no, I'm gonna keep it much smaller in this instance, a really easy to accommodate item. I I'm gonna walk back my take on how bad the Hurley birthday sequence was. I love when his mom takes that statue and says, "Jesus Christ is not a weapon." So I want the Jesus Christ statue, so that I can just every once in a while pick it up and remind folks that Jesus Christ is not a weapon. Now enjoy your party.
I do have to say, Chris, I came really close to taking the 15-year-old sleeve of saltines. I came really close to taking that instead, but ultimately the Camaro like edged it out just a tiny bit.
A little bit. One may be a little more visually impactful than the other.
They're good, dude.
Sawyer didn't disagree.
No. All right, folks. We've done it. We've done it again. This brings us to the end of another episode of Lost and Lit. I want to thank Dr. John Aspler for joining us once again as our resident Lost expert. And of course, I've got to thank Karen for joining us, uh, and not only bringing like her experience with the Lost fandom, with the podcasting community, with the stars of the show, the creators of the show, but just some incredibly smart and wise reads on the text of the show. Like talk about just cutting to the heart of what this Lost and Lit show is all about. Karen, you were phenomenal, so thank you.
Oh my god, thank you so much. I'm floored. Thank you very much. This is a lot of fun. If we're gonna talk about Lost, you really can't shut me up, so but this has been a blast. Thank you so much.
Yeah, this was really tremendous. I had a blast with both of you tonight. Thank you for joining us. John, it's never a bad time to have you in the pod, and Karen, I'm so excited to have you back. We tend to have Randy's a games master, so we'll put panels together once in a while for drafts and other things, and I'm excited to welcome you into the family.
Oh, thank you.
Well, for all the podlings out there who enjoyed this episode tonight, who want to keep up with MediaLit moving forward, you're going to find us on the socials. Please, first and foremost, be it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you consume these delightful tidbits, give us a rating and a follow. You'll see that next episode when it drops, usually every 2 weeks, but we'll be right live in your feed. Otherwise, you can find us on Instagram at media.lit.pod, on Blue Sky, a new favorite of mine, at media-lit, or if you're still there on Twitter, you can find us at Media Lit Pod. We've got a website linked in the episode description. Find us there for more information on your hosts, on the show. And if you want to chat, feel free to send us an email at media.slash.lit@gmail.com.
And yeah, definitely check out that website. You'll find all the obsessive little graphics I've made to break down all the little segments and recurring series on the show, including Lost and Lit, if you want to dig straight into these episodes. But before we go, Chris, in addition to Media Lit, what else do you have going on out there in the world, and where can folks find you?
Aside from Media Lit, I also am the co-host of the Batman by the Numbers podcast on the Pop Break feed. And oh, aside from that, I'm also a father, a husband, an actor, and a voice actor. I do all of those things on Instagram at Kris_Ingersoll or on Blue Sky at Kris-Ingersoll. In both instances, that is Chris spelled like Kringle.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I'm your host, Randy Elaine. To find me, I'm actually going to just beg you to go find Media Lit out there first. I put tons of time linking myself to all those profiles, and I would love it if you followed me as well. But more importantly, I'd love to see you follow the show. If you're sick of hearing me talk, you can also head over to popbreak.com, where you can see all kinds of media writing from me. Um, I recently covered the entirety of season 2 of Severance. I'm always finding excuses to write about Bluey and Doctor Who over there, so check me out. And if you do want to keep hearing my lovely voice, you can also check me out on the Pop Break podcast feed after you check out a Batman by the Numbers. Go check out an episode of Pod of Doom, the Black Sabbath appreciation podcast that I do with Justin and Kris Mancini. It's always a good time, and I'm learning so much about this band.
What a journey.
All right, folks, thanks again for being here. We'll see you next time, and have a great night.
Boom. Lost.